So, Jean Marie, thank you so much for joining us on Asking for a Friend.
It's great to be here. Thanks.
So, I asked you to come here to ask this big question that is on so many people's minds, which is how do you really create psychological safety in your team? What are your practical ideas for that? And I know that you and I both spend a lot of time thinking about that, working with teams on that. So, I really wanted to ask you that question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So a couple of things come to mind, and you probably realize that I am obsessed about questions. So one of the biggest tools that I use with teams that works really well is coming up with and asking really powerful questions. But not just any question. It's really about asking questions that dig deeper into how people feel, what they're experiencing, what they would like more of, and how each of us can actually change. Like, as a leader, what can I do differently? How can I create more open space? And how can I create an environment where we are safe to share our views and safe to disagree with each other?
What are a couple of your favorite courageous questions to have teams work
Yeah,
with?
that's great. One question would be, what's one gift, skill, or talent that I've overlooked, underutilized, or undervalued? That's one that really hits people and has them feel heard and understood, right?
A lot of times when we'll work with executives, they'll say, I wish my boss knew how much time I spend coaching, developing my people. I don't feel like I get credit for that part of my job. I get credit for the numbers. And
Yeah.
so I think that's a very
Mhm.
similar with that question. You're inviting
Mhm.
people to talk about how they do that well.
One other question I really love is, what kind of conversations would you like to see us having that we're not having today? First of all, it's a question that can put the other on the spot a little bit. So I do recommend, when you're asked as a leader, when you're asking these questions, give them in advance to the person you're asking. In this question, if it's asked kind of right away, there's always just like silence, right? Because it's like, well, I don't know what
Right.
kind of conversations. But when you give people time, a lot of the answers are around, well, just ask me how I'm doing.
Yeah.
Like, how am I feeling today? How is this project going? Not just doing this, but like the being aspect of it. The listening is often, I would say, even more important than the asking of the questions. And listening with an open mind, listening free from judgment, which literally means we put everything out of our head in that moment and place it aside and be 100% present to that person in front of us, and just keep getting curious. I always say the secret to staying present is to get curious about the person in front of you.
I'm thinking about a conversation I had this week where I said, don't you think it would be really important to talk to a HR person who's in charge of the HR side? Don't you think it would be really important to ensure that every employee on your team had an active development plan this year? And he said, well, I'm afraid to raise that question about what do they want from their career, because what if we can't give it to them?
Well, my response would sort of be painting the scenario of, well, what if we don't ask it? What are we missing out on? It's so counterintuitive. It's really the opposite.
Just because you don't ask the question doesn't mean it's not there. And
Exactly.
wouldn't you rather know what is on people's hearts and minds, even if you can't solve for the whole thing?
Right.
And then
Right.
at least you can respond and be in conversation and
Mhm.
dialogue and how, well, maybe we can't address that right now, but here's the path to get there in the future.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Which is ironic, isn't it? Because what you're pointing to is what psychological safety is. It's having the authentic conversations. It's raising the topics that you don't want to talk about, but you know if you do, it will make a huge difference. So yeah, it's funny how it comes full circle, right?
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much. If you had to leave us with one piece of advice, what would that be?
Stay curious always in every conversation.
Perfect. Jean Marie, thank you so much for being our guest today on Asking for a Friend, talking about psychological safety.
Welcome.